All right, welcome back, everyone. So you can see I am still on the road and a lot going on, working on some big stuff, and good to see you all as usual. Now, some big stories to go into tonight. We're going to be talking about this new Pegasus spyware that's been going around. Basically, the government's been spying on chats, targeting journalists, targeting dissidents, targeting people who may be opposed to governments in different parts of the world. And what this means when it comes to your chats probably not actually being as secure as you may think they are. Keep in mind also that there's some talk, for example, about even censoring your ability to talk about, this is separate, but censoring your ability to even talk about the vaccines over SMS, like normal chat message on your phone. Some interesting stuff happening with this. We'll be talking about it. Also, folks, who remembers John Durham, the report we were expecting for a very long time now, and everyone was waiting for prosecutions? Well, there's some update on that now. Some individuals at the Justice Department saying that maybe we'll see a report soon, and very likely that report will be made public. I'll be explaining this as we go into it. That said, folks, it's good to see you all. This is from the Empress. He said, "Hi, Josh from Switzerland. Good to see you." Rachel Roque, he said, "Good evening, Josh." Prime 61, dissents. That would be me. That's right. Alex Escobedo, sorry, that's said hello, Josh. Hello as well. Sally McNeil, thank you, from Texas. Dave Johnson, good evening as well. Yeah, I'm actually in South Dakota still right now. I was at Freedom Fest and planes got canceled, and so we were, me and the team were checking out some of the monuments. You can check out on Instagram. I posted some of them. Actually, we've had a good time checking out the Mount Rushmore and a few other ones out here. It's been interesting. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into the first stories for the night. I want to start by talking about what's happening with Pegasus, this whole spyware program. Epoch Times has an article on it here. Let's go over it. It says, the international spyware scandal runs deeper than Pegasus. It says, much attention has been paid recently to bombshell allegations that Israel-created spyware may have been used to target journalists, dissidents, and other enemies of the state. But the Pegasus scandal is a mere microcosm of the larger issue of governments using private companies for surveillance operations. And this is again part of this broader, I think, trend we're watching now, where we are technically protected against a lot of things like this. Under the Constitution, we have protections against this. But what governments have been doing is bypassing the constitutional rights and going to private companies. In other words, they can go through companies that don't have to respect your constitutional rights, and private companies do this and then work as, say, informants or wherever for the government. This is becoming a more common issue we're seeing with censorship, with possible vaccine passports, with spying on your phone, and very likely is going to be something that continues until maybe there's a lawsuit or something to stop it. But this right now is the way things are going, not just in the US, but in many countries. Now, it continues saying, on July 18th, The Guardian and 16 other media outlets began publishing a series of stories about the Israeli-based NSO group, alleging that foreign governments used the company's Pegasus software to surveil at least 180 journalists and numerous other targets around the world. Developed by former members of the elite Israeli 8200, that's Unit 8200, comparable to the U.S. National Security Agency, or the NSA, which is also having its controversies. You might have heard recently that it turns out that, yes, the NSA was in fact spying on Tucker Carlson of Fox News, by the way. So we have some direct government surveillance as well. But it continues stating, the Pegasus software allegedly infects iPhones and Androids, enabling operators to extract messages, photos, and emails, record calls, and activate microphones in secret. Alleged possible targets of Pegasus surveillance include the slain Washington Post writer Jamal Khashoggi, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi, along with numerous other targets. Now, NSO, this Israeli company, explicitly denies that its software was associated in any way with the heinous murder of the Washington Post writer, who had some issues on his own. We won't go into that here. Now, allegations about the NSO group's wrongdoing have been in the media for years. Facebook actually sued NSO Group in federal court back in 2019 for allegedly exploiting a vulnerability in WhatsApp, allowing Pegasus users to spy on the calls and messages of victims, including journalists and human rights activists. The case is pending appeal in the Ninth Circuit, where the NSO Group has argued that it should have sovereign immunity from civil organizations, from civil litigation. We won't go over all of it here, folks, but this is becoming a trend. You know, what the other part of this too is it's important to note this is a private company. And so even if it works with the US government, even if it works with a foreign government, they're not specifically tied to any one country, any one government. They can sell it to a lot of different governments. And when you have a product-based system that can spy on people, that can monitor cell phone communications, read your emails, read your text messages, look at the photos you're sending, record your phone calls, access your microphone even when your phone is not on, which, you know, a lot of these systems can do. They're selling this as a product. And they're selling it as a product at least to government officials and maybe to other people as well. And when you have a product like this that can be sold internationally, what that means is the globalization of basically a spy tool. Imagine, for example, if North Korea had surveillance technology on par with what the United States has. Imagine if the capabilities of your most developed countries when it comes to the ability to launch cyber attacks or hack systems were available to every single dictator in any part of the world, countries that normally would not be able to develop software like that. Well, this is what we're looking at with this. We're looking at basically the globalization of surveillance tools, the globalization of, through the private sector, interestingly, an intelligence agency, essentially, or a company with the functions of an intelligence agency, able to carry out the same operations as an intelligence agency in this regard. The other concerning thing is that actually the type of data that they'd be accessing, not all of it, like monitoring WhatsApp and stuff like that's a different thing, but accessing your camera, accessing your microphone, reading your notes, all this stuff, you actually give access on par with that to a lot of apps you might install on your cell phone. I encourage you all next time you install an app to actually read what it can monitor. And these companies, they take that data and they sell it. Some companies they sell it to might have government ties, and those government ties mean that basically it could carry out operations very similar to this. This is a trend, and it's a financially lucrative trend that big tech, many companies are financing themselves off of. And this ties into the issue as well of, again, NSA, yes, spying on Tucker Carlson. The story came out on that as well. All right, folks, I've mentioned before that Crossroads is totally demonetized on YouTube. Luckily, we do have DonorBox. Thank you all for supporting us there. We also have Epoch TV, epochtv.com. And so, again, thank you all for supporting us there as well. But luckily, we also have some sponsors. And tonight's episode is brought to you by Secure. And this is an interesting company. I'll tell you why. Now, pretty much, right? While we're just talking about surveillance, you have to make sure that you do everything you can to protect yourself when emailing and messaging others online, because really at the end of the day, you don't have the type of privacy you may believe that you have. Everything you do online, your emails, everything is basically scanned and monitored. Almost everything can be, at least. Your online data always seems under the magnifying glass by big tech and maybe big government too. People get anxious because they cannot protect their online data and activity. But now there's a new way you can actually create legitimate privacy online using an email or messenger app. It's a new privacy and cybersecurity application tool called Secure. That's spelled S-E-K-U-R. And Secure is offering private and secure instant messaging and email, and its servers and data centers are hosted in Switzerland. And why Switzerland, you might ask? It's an interesting answer to that. It's because Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure is using proprietary encryption technology and an independent platform to ensure the complete privacy of your data. Your emails, documents, chat messages will be kept safe and private. And Secure also does not mine your data and is not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act, where any type of software built in the US or using Amazon or Microsoft could be subject to the Cloud Act, whereas they could monitor your data even if the companies aren't directly working with intelligence agencies. Now, you can very easily communicate with both secure users and non-secure users and set any time to destruct messages or emails you send to protect your privacy. And Secure's technology allows you to communicate privately without fear of spying from your internet provider and without the need of a VPN service to secure your connection. Now, it costs only $5 for the messenger and only $10 for the email and messenger package. You can take back your freedom and your privacy. You can visit secure.com today. That's SEKUR.com. And you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off if you want to sign up. Again, folks, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring tonight's episode. Now, that said, I want to talk about what's happening with John Durham on the note of surveillance, in this case, government surveillance and intelligence agency surveillance against a sitting president of the United States. Tonight's drink, by the way, is a very rare brand of tea. It's a South Dakota hotel black tea. It's quite interesting. Not my usual choice, but it's interesting. But I want to talk about what's happening with John Durham. Now, briefly, a lot of us have been wondering what's going to happen with John Durham. John Durham was appointed special counsel, and he was given the ability to investigate what happened in the quote-unquote Crossfire hurricane scandal, also called Spygate. This is where individuals like James Comey, heads of agencies, FBI, and others appeared to have been colluding with each other to spy on a sitting president of the United States, targeting people within his campaign, monitoring their communications, and trying to basically use this information to impeach Trump. A lot of this came from the Trump-Russia dossier, you might remember, which by now has been debunked. But it was disinformation passed to an individual working under Fusion GPS, hired by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee to basically write this report they had. Now, that report was gathered allegedly from 2 Russian sources by a former British spy. The former British spy never actually verified the information. That was Christopher Steele. And lo and behold, what you had happen is the president of the United States was dragged through the mud for over 3, maybe even 4 years. And many people in this country still don't know the truth of what actually happened. Now, John Durham was assigned to investigate this. John Durham was supposed to release a government report on this, and John Durham was appointed special counsel. We've heard nothing from him since. But there's a slight update tonight, so I'll go over it. It says here, Durham report likely to be made public. And this is according to a justice official. Take it for what it's worth, but it is some update. It says here, when special counsel John Durham finishes his investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe, his report will likely be made public, a Department of Justice official suggested in a newly released letter. Now, Durham is again investigating the department's counterintelligence operations against Trump campaign and associates, which was riddled with errors and malfeasance, the campaign of monitoring him, that is. Now, the timeline for the probe to wrap up is unclear. We're still wondering where Durham is. But then Attorney General William Barr indicated last year the final report should be made public, noting that a confidential report on what the investigation found will be produced as required by law. Durham, it says here, according to Barr, in an October 2020 order, said, to the maximum extent possible and consistent with the law and policies and practices of the Department of Justice, shall submit to the Attorney General a final report and such interim reports as he deems appropriate in a form that will permit public dissemination. We'll see what happens with it. Barr has, of course, been accused of having been against Trump within the administration. He has denied some of those allegations. We don't know what's happening with Durham. Very little updates on this. But there is a Justice Department official now suggesting that this is going to be made public. And I'll just see what happens with it. This is according to a new letter they have. All right, a brief update on that, folks. I want to talk what's happening right now with the virus, the vaccine passports, though. And it's interesting. You have protests happening all around the world right now, throughout Europe, mostly through Europe and Australia. And this may be a telltale sign of what's coming to other countries to try to implement policies like this. Maybe even the United States, we'll have to see. And because basically people are unhappy with the possibility of having vaccine mandates and they're going on the streets and they're protesting about this. Let's jump into it. It says here, first of all, protests rage across Europe as lockdowns, vaccination mandates start. New lockdowns too, folks. Get ready for it. Now it says here, anti-lockdown and anti-vaccine passport protests erupted across Europe on July 24th, according to media photos and videos. Thousands upon thousands of demonstrators came out in London, Dublin, Paris, Rome, Athens, and other cities across Europe, according to footage and news reports. The demonstrations in France appeared to be the most tense. French are oftentimes known for their love of protest, right? With riot police firing tear gas and clashes erupting in central Paris. Police sought to push back demonstrators near the capital's Gare Saint-Lazare railway station after protesters knocked over a police motorbike ridden by two officers, news footage showed. Scuffles between police and demonstrators also broke out at the Champs-Élysées thoroughfare, where tear gas was fired and traffic was halted, the video showed as well. France's interior minister said that about 160,000 people partook in the protests on July 24th, which is quite a lot. And that's up again from 114,000 just the week before, according to Reuters. So in 1 week, folks, this went from 114,000 people to 160,000 people. And we'll have to see if this is going to be a continuing trend, whether they're going to keep increasing these numbers or if it's going to stabilize somewhere. But currently, the trajectory is upward. Currently, these are growing protests. The reason for the protest, in part, many reasons, you can't say what everyone's purpose is, was due to pending legislation in France's parliament that would set up a vaccine passport system, as well as a vaccination mandate for all healthcare workers. The passport bill would force people to show proof of COVID-19 vaccination or a negative test result to enter restaurants and other public areas, which critics have described as needlessly draconian. Protesters railed against the protested legislation, saying no to shameful pass, while denigrating French President Emmanuel Macron as a tyrant. Now, this isn't just in Europe. This is happening again. That's also not just in France. This is happening in many parts of Europe right now. It's also happening in Australia. Let's jump into that now. It says thousands of Australians protest lockdowns in Sydney and Melbourne. These are specifically protests against the lockdowns now happening, because lockdowns are coming back, folks. Right when we thought we were reopening, lockdowns are coming back. We'll see about in the United States, but in Europe, Australia, yes. It says here, thousands of Australians fed up with the COVID-19 lockdowns marched in Sydney and Melbourne on Saturday as part of the worldwide Rally for Freedom protests. Australians gathered in the thousands at inner Sydney's Victoria Park before marching to Town Hall in the central business district. They were escorted by a heavy police presence, which included mounted police and riot police officers. Now, I mentioned before that we'll have to see what happens in terms of lockdowns starting again, especially as we go into 2022, the next election cycle, where maybe changing election laws will be something people are interested in doing yet again. We'll have to see what happens with it, but this is the trajectory we have right now around the world. And in the U.S., we'll have to see. Now, there's an update here that may affect the U.S. It's from Dr. Fauci, everybody's favorite physician. And it says here, CDC looking at changing mask guidelines for vaccinated people. So, folks, you might have heard in some cities around the United States that if you're vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. Dr. Fauci is now changing that, and Dr. Fauci is saying, well, even if you're vaccinated, you should wear a mask yet again. And the bar of truth is again shifted. It is again shifted because, again, Dr. Fauci was initially against masks. Then he said they didn't work. Then he said they work. Then he said they're mandated. Then he said you don't have to wear them if you're vaccinated. Now he's going back and saying wear them if you're vaccinated as well. So let's go into it. It says National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Anthony Fauci said federal health officials are considering recommending that fully vaccinated people wear masks in public again. He said this is under active consideration. He told us to CNN. in response to a question about whether masks should be used again despite individuals' COVID-19 vaccination status. And Fauci, who serves as President Joe Biden's chief medical advisor, he was also under Trump, added, quote, "If we don't vaccinate people, the model is going to predict that we're going to be in trouble as we continue to get more and more cases." Some areas, including Los Angeles County and Chicago, recently said that everyone, regardless of vaccination status, should wear masks in public settings. The U.S. Center for Disease Control, the CDC, additionally recommended that all children who are not vaccinated wear masks when they return to class in the fall. And Fauci said this on Sunday. That's a local decision that's not incompatible with the CDC's overall recommendations. They give a lot of discretion to the locals. And we're seeing that in LA, we're seeing it in Chicago, we're seeing it in New Orleans, because the officials there, many of them are saying, even if you're vaccinated, it's prudent to wear a mask indoors. Now, during the Sunday interview, Fauci did not provide a specific reason why vaccinated people specifically should wear masks. Because again, you would think that vaccinated people would not get the virus and it would not be of concern, which was the original reason why I said he didn't have to wear them. Now, Joe Biden and others are saying that the vaccinations work, and they're even saying it's almost absolute. You have other reports coming out, such as in Israel, where they had mass vaccinations, saying that, well, they actually don't work as well when it comes to the new variants of the virus coming out, specifically the Delta variant. Now, we'll have to see what happens with this. Again, we do have this new variant spreading yet again. If you go by what the Florida governor is saying, DeSantis, he's saying that it's the seasonal flu, the new seasonal flu, essentially. And very likely when flu season rolls out again, we're going to see the virus out again, as we will probably every flu season for the foreseeable future. And so the question now is whether we deal with the virus like a flu, deal with the virus like a seasonal thing that comes out every year, or deal with it in the new method that was pioneered by the Chinese Communist Party and promoted around the world, which are lockdowns, mask mandates, and economic shutdowns. And the model here in the United States of, lockdowns, mask mandates, economic shutdowns, and voter reform leading into 2022. Keep an eye out for this, folks, because they're pushing for it. We'll have to see if it happens. They are pushing for it. But we'll have to see where it goes as well, because some states at this point I don't think would follow it. We'll have to see. Now, another note here about COVID-19. Does everyone remember how Governor Cuomo in New York took seniors and put them in senior homes and took people who were infected and put them there? And many people died because older people are more susceptible to the virus, and actually how this happened in many states across the U.S., where local government officials may have played a significant role in the high death tolls of the virus. Really kind of unintentionally or not, pseudo-genocidal acts, I would say. Well, it turns out now that the U.S. will not be investigating governors who ordered nursing homes to accept COVID-19 positive residents. So, folks, some of the most prolific mass murderers of our age may not be investigated. It says here, the U.S. Department of Justice has opted against investigating any of the Democrat governors who last year ordered nursing homes to accept residents. Remember, they ordered them to accept them, who tested positive for COVID-19 against the recommendations of health groups. In other words, they were warned, if you do that, people may die. They said, well, they should do it anyways. And not only did they say you should do it, they said you have to do it. This is a government order. And that government order may have killed tens of thousands of people. Now, federal officials reviewed information they received from New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and New Jersey last year regarding the orders. And remember that Governor Cuomo in New York even tried covering this up. His office tried covering it up, remember? Now, based on the review of this, they're not opening civil rights to Institutionalized Persons Act, CRIPA investigations in the first 3 states. Joe Gaeta, a deputy attorney general, told Representative Steve Scalise in a letter on July 23rd. Now, they said in the first 3 states, meaning that New Jersey may be up in the air still. Now, the act enables the attorney general to initiate a case in court against a state or local government or its employees or agents when officials suspect or find that people and institutions owned or run by such a government have had their rights denied. Now, it's not saying there won't be lawsuits. It's not saying other stuff will not happen. But from that level of government, they're not going to be investigating it. And so we may never know the full extent of this unless there's lawsuits. And maybe individual lawsuits can do something about it, but we'll have to see, because you do have, to a degree, qualified immunity for these government officials, although they may have overstepped their boundaries in terms of law with this one. Now, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll get to in just a minute. I want to talk briefly what's happening with Trump, because some may be wondering. So if you have questions, again, leave them in the chat now. In a little bit, we'll go over the Q&A, and we'll go into some more stories. But I want to talk about Trump real quick. Now, Trump is in Arizona, or just was, and he's, of course, this is where you have the audits taking place, the election audits looking into the irregularities that took place in the 2020 election. And Trump is hailing the Arizona Republican Senate for their election audit at his Phoenix rally. It says here, President Donald Trump hailed the Arizona Senate on July 24th for its months-long audit of Maricopa County's 2.1 million ballots and election equipment, while pressing Arizona's Attorney General to investigate the audit's findings. Trump suggesting the Attorney General should investigate the findings of the audits, not necessarily meaning look into the audit, maybe that, but investigate more deeply what they uncovered. Now, speaking at an Arizona event called Rally for Election Integrity, the former president, Trump, said the state Senate did the right thing when it authorized an audit of the county, Maricopa County, a process that's still ongoing. And he said this, "We will fight for truth, transparency, and accountability, and we will not stop until we have restored our American birthright of honest, free, and fair elections." That's Trump in his speech. And he said this as well, "We're gathered here in Phoenix to show our support for election integrity and for the brave and unyielding conservative warriors in the Arizona State Senate." Trump praised Arizona Republican Party Chair Kelly Ward, who has frequently posted about alleged election fraud since last November. And Trump described her as someone who was really a fighter. And he said, "I called up Kelly recently. Why?" And he said, he told her, "Why wouldn't the governor want an audit?" The question we've posed as well. "Maybe everything will prove to be correct, which we know won't happen," Trump remarked, referring to Governor Doug Ducey. "Why wouldn't someone want election integrity? Why wouldn't they want to know? And I would be very happy. Won't happen. But I would be very happy if they did it and everything was perfect, but you're not going to find that." Trump suggesting again that they're not going to find that nothing was wrong. They're going to find the opposite, that very likely many things were wrong. Now, important part on this is illustrating not just Trump's, again, getting behind different public officials across the United States. Again, he has a new PAC, Political Action Committee, and he's working on backing political candidates to help Republicans retake the House and the Senate. Republicans want to control both branches of the judicial branch of our government. There's a good chance they're at the very least going to win back the House. We'll have to see what happens with it. But it's important to note here that Trump is actually not just going on that. He's also holding rallies for election integrity. And these rallies for this are going to get very likely the attention of any other state representative, any other local legislature across the United States who may be listening and who wants to have a similar investigation to what Maricopa County is having right now in their states. I'd love to see what happens with this, folks. Again, a lot of ways this can go. We're still waiting for the final information coming out on what actually is taking place with this audit in Maricopa County, Arizona. We're still waiting for the findings on it. They're still in Maricopa County, in Arizona. They're still waiting for the Maricopa County officials to provide the last bit of information to complete the audit, because the officials there do not seem to be interested in providing the evidence they're asking for, which is interesting. But based on that, we're going to see a report weeks or even months after that is finished, but very likely before the 2022 elections. All right, folks, that says jump into some questions for the night. First, though, again, I've mentioned before that Crossroads now, our main channel is Epoch TV. That's epochtv.com/Crossroads. Folks, please check it out. We have some great programs there. I recently did a documentary called America Rewritten. I have another one in the works. I won't hit too much at it, but we do have another one in the works. Should be done not too long, but I'll keep you all updated on it. A lot in the works. We have a lot of different shows there. Crossroads is there. Tiffany Meyer's shows are there. Deep Dive and China in Focus. You have Roman Balmakov, the Epoch Times advertisement guy. We have Danielle D'Souza, Dinesh D'Souza's daughter. We have a lot of shows coming on actually soon as well. Sam Sorbo's doing a homeschooling show. A lot of great programming. We're trying to bring on a lot of other stuff as well. So please check it out. Again, that's epochtv.com/crossroads. epochtv.com/crossroads. We'll show you a quick trailer of what we're working on right now.
Independent films are about to take off. Really, there's a lot of independent films now challenging what Hollywood used to be.
I think what Hollywood does, it's fine. I mean, the movies they do seem to be constantly bashing the right, of course. And we have turned the bad guy into the hero. We're trying to make him the great guy. Every time you see a sitcom, the dad is sort of fat and a loser and a dope. And the kids make fun of him, and the wife's got the hot babe wife, that knows all the answers. I'm trying to do movies that have a positive, a moral value to them. That make you laugh, make you cry, make you think. Movies that got hope. We need hope more than anything. Movies that got redemption. Movies that got love. So that's the kind of movies that I want to do, and I'm going to keep doing those kind of movies to fight what I got to say, the crap that's coming out of Hollywood. That's all negative.
All right, folks. That says jump into the questions for the night. As always, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. First question here is from Damien0410. You say, Joshua Phillips, the Biden administration, Department of Justice dropped the charges for the Chinese spies and the nursing home deaths in Michigan and New York. Have you heard anything about this? Yeah, well, I won't go into the nursing home thing again. Yes, they're not. Well, technically, they're not going to investigate it, right? But also, they dropped charges against 5 Chinese hackers as well. 5 Chinese spies as well. And so they have dropped charges against both the Chinese spies, and the Department of Justice under Biden is not going to be investigating the nursing home deaths. And so, yes, that is the case. Next question here. This is from Matthew B. Street. You said, what good does it do to bring nefarious behaviors to light when the DOJ refuses to? Well, folks, I'd say it's because one of the way, let's put it this way, this is why they censor media. This is why they try to call things disinformation. This is why Facebook censors, very likely. This is why a lot of big tech censors. This is why big media works together with a lot of these big tech companies to censor you. This is why they'll call forward all these different heads of these big tech companies to the halls of our Capitol buildings and talk to them about why they're not censoring more. It's because public information and public knowledge is what drives people to vote. Public information and public knowledge is what gives pressure to government officials to change things if those things are broken or if they're unethical. If people are not aware of what the government is doing, if they're not aware of the problems in this country, nothing is going to be done about it. Now, the fact that, yes, they do have a supermajority, yes, they can kind of do whatever they want, and yes, there are issues right now. Just because they're not going to investigate something doesn't mean that public information isn't important. And I would say this is emblematic in the fact, again, that they wouldn't bother to censor or encourage platforms to censor if it wasn't something they were concerned about. Public knowledge is something powerful. That, actually, one of the greatest ways to get the government to do something, have a local media report about it, have a protest about it, get them to face up to the fact of what they're doing and show the world what they're doing. And actually, that tends to be the greatest little prod to get government to start moving. And again, that's also why I think they're trying to prevent people from learning about information like this, learning about information that they don't want to act on. Right? There's a reason that censorship exists, and it's that. Even in countries like China, under the Chinese Communist Party that controls everything, you have them censoring media, and there's a reason for that again. It's that public knowledge is powerful. This is from Kyle Scalfani. He said, Josh, didn't Fauci essentially say that modeling is rarely accurate sometime near the outset for the coronavirus task force? Yes, if I remember right, he did. And he said, is this another issue flip-flop? Well, it's an issue flip-flop, not just on the modeling thing. And I do remember him talking about that. It's also a flip-flop at least twice now on the masks and the, say, effectiveness of the masks. Folks, you might want to read the box of your masks, because very likely they do not protect against viruses such as coronaviruses. But, it makes people feel safe, I guess, and maybe that helps. One of the big things they say it helps with is people who are infected with it breathing out, and maybe they think it's going to stop it. I don't know. Maybe it does. I don't think right now the data has really shown much on that, let's put it that way. Because we can look at areas where you've had really tight lockdowns and areas where you've had very little lockdowns, and frankly, the very tight lockdowns tend to turn out worse. Although that may again be partly because the numbers are inflated, because your local government officials in some areas, your governors, through forcing senior homes to take people infected with the virus, may have contributed quite a bit to the death toll. Another question here is from NC4ET. It said, if it is definitely proven through forensic audit that Trump won, can anything change with USA's leadership before 2022 or 2024? I mean, technically, yes. Technically, something could change. Would it change? It's going to be dicey. Let's put it that way. You would have to have the Supreme Court get involved with this and basically invalidate the election and maybe even launch investigations into it. And frankly, I'm not personally confident they would do that. Maybe they would. I'm personally not confident they would do that. But also, you have issues where, for example, I don't think Biden would ever step down. I don't think Kamala Harris would ever step down. And very likely, instead, what you're going to see is they're going to file lawsuits. You're going to see a lot of local lawsuits against the audits, because the audits are what the audits are going to be the basis that they're going to use to show that fraud took place and that that Trump would have won in these areas. Already, you're seeing significant evidence of this in Georgia and in Arizona. Technically, Trump would need to win back enough. He would need to win states that would give him enough electoral college votes technically where he would have won the election. And so he'd have to win Arizona and maybe a couple other places in order to overturn that. Technically, then he'd have a path to, maybe the Supreme Court can invalidate it and bring it back in, but it'd be very complicated. And I don't think there's a precedent for it. What's very likely going to happen in my analysis is they're going to do the audits. Arizona audit's going to complete. You're going to have the findings come out from it. It's already looking not too hot for the Biden administration. We'll have to see what happens in the end. But the Biden administration, through the Department of Justice, is very likely going to file lawsuits against it, and they're already doing this in some regards. And they're going to be filing lawsuits against other areas where people are we're going to be trying to change election laws. And you're going to see local lawsuits and other lawsuits that are going to basically accuse the auditors and the local officials of basically falsifying data or whatever else. You're going to see it get locked up in the courts, meaning that it can drag out for 4 to 6 years, very likely, which means that they're going to lock it in the courts rather than have a removal of Biden from office and have Trump come back in or something like that. But the significant part of this isn't that, in my opinion. The significant part of this is going to be, again, public knowledge, and also other states looking at what's happening and wanting to hold their own audits. And as those audits move forward and those audits complete and findings of them come out, you're going to have a very informed public demanding, I think, changes to some of these election systems to ensure that issues that they're seeing don't happen where they are. Because if it does not, you're going to have a serious loss of faith in the integrity of our entire system of government, basically, which is the ability for us to choose our own leaders. I think, again, the biggest part of these audits is that you're going to watch other states do their own audits. You're going to watch them release their findings. You're going to watch states change election laws based on those findings. And you're going to watch a whole lot of very angry Americans basically witnessing what took place in 2022 and figuring out how to move forward from there, and also going to the polls very likely in 2022. I say 22, I mean 2020. And going to the polls very likely in 2022 to vote for their leaders in the House and the Senate, who will have the power to impeach if they get a majority. And so it's going to be interesting to watch at the very least, and expect as well massive disinformation campaigns by all the legacy media, because they're going to have it in their political interest to try to hide the truth from you as it emerges, and big tech as well. Another question here. This is from Aaron Desolate. You said, question, in the documentary America Rewritten, Japan was called state capitalism. I don't think that's correct. There are very few state-owned companies in Japan. For example, JNRJT, NKH, NTT. What do you think? And thank you very much. Sorry for asking that question multiple times. Well, state capitalism is just a word for socialism. It's just another word for socialism. It goes back to the Bolshevik Revolution. Vladimir Lenin wrote a paper, I believe it was called "How Can We Advance to Communism If We Fear the Stage of Socialism?" And in that report, that article, Vladimir Lenin described socialism as the state capitalist monopoly. In other words, the state has seized the means of productions, right? The state seizes the means of production, meaning the capitalist system is under control of the state, i.e. state capitalism. Now, is Japan purely state capitalism? No, you do have private companies there. You do have some state-run companies. Technically, the U.S. has some state-run companies as well. If you were to ask me, I'd say most countries in the world are practicing socialism to one degree or another. We don't have a lot of complete, full-on socialist states like technically the Chinese Communist Party. And I should explain this. A lot of people wonder what the difference between socialism and communism is. Communism is like the idea that drives forward the movement. Socialism is the form it takes when in power. Every communist government we've ever seen was a socialist government. The Soviet Union was socialist. Cuba is socialist. Venezuela is socialist. North Korea is socialist. The guiding ideology they have is communist. But technically, you can only reach communism through the negation of systems. The socialist system would need to collapse in order to realize the true communist system, which communism, if you were to ask my opinion, is really desolation. It ties to the idea of the negation of the negation, the destruction of all existing institutions, and the belief that something magical will emerge from everything once you destroy everything, right? It's essentially what it is. So I'd say all countries in the world, in some degree or another, they're all practicing socialism. High taxes to support this social welfare system, interventionist policies within businesses, technically even going back to the late 1800s in the United States. We've had a lot of socialist laws introduced here. A lot of things people criticize in capitalism are actually originating from socialist policies that were introduced into capitalism. And so I know that I think it was Trevor Loudon who said Japan was state capitalism, or one of the other ones said it was state capitalism. I mean, yes, Japan has elements of that. I wouldn't say it's absolute. They're not complete state capitalism, but they do have elements of it, as do many countries, even the United States. This is from Diane. He said, Josh, do you know anything about flooding of DUMBs? I personally do not, but I will look into it. Thank you. I will make a note of it. Thank you. And this is from Parosia. He said, Josh, a nurse in another stream I was on said that many people are being hospitalized who've been double vaccinated, but they've been told to record them as unvaccinated. Would you please investigate this? I think that does warrant investigation. It'd be hard to prove, but it does warrant investigation. Maybe talking to nurses would do it. I mean, you have seen issues like this. Right now in Israel, for example, they're talking about the fairly low efficacy rate of these vaccines against the Delta variant. And you do have issues as well of, deaths just not being recorded as what they are. I mean, if someone goes to the doctor and they're having respiratory issues and they don't want to classify it as having COVID-19, so like, oh, I'm vaccinated, you don't have to bother testing me for it, and they die of, say, heart complications or whatever else. The chance of them actually classifying it as having died from the virus despite being vaccinated, we'll have to see. Whether they are doing that and being told to record them as unvaccinated, You're right. It would have to be investigated. I couldn't say that, but it is something I think does warrant investigation. All right, last question here. Then we'll go into some more stories. This is from NC4ET. He said, Josh, thank you, and question. Thank you as well. He said, how likely is it that the Dems, the Democrats, will pass voting reform via some kind of backdoor reconciliation that Joe Manchin, SP, would vote for? Well, I think you're going to see it state by state. Again, I don't think you're going to see this get pushed through from the federal level. They do have the For the People Act. For which people, I don't know. The For the People Act, the one where they're trying to federalize the election system essentially and basically institutionalize from the level of the federal government a lot of the changes that were made to our voting systems in the 2020 elections. A lot of things that were very controversial they did in the 2020 elections would be institutionalized at the level of the federal government if they're able to pass that. Now, would states go along with that? Because under the Constitution, the state legislatures are the ones that run this? Probably not. But you would have a Supreme Court battle and really a battle over the integrity of the elections if the federal government were trying to intervene in local election processes. It would be a very interesting battle to watch and could really prevent even the next election from happening. And maybe that's a jump, but it would cause a lot of issues here in the United States. Let's put it that way. The chance of them actually doing that is mixed. They would have to win over again Senator Joe Manchin. Could they do that? Who knows? It doesn't seem like he's interested in voting on this. And it's a bit of background for everyone. Basically, Democrats, we have a 50-50 split in the Senate right now between Democrats and Republicans. But if there's a tie, the tie-breaking vote goes to the vice president. Kamala Harris gets the tie-breaking vote, meaning Democrats have a very slight majority in the Senate. Now, that makes it very hard for them to pass anything, though, because we do have this filibuster in place. And Democrats have been talking about getting rid of the filibuster, but it's being blocked by one senator or maybe a couple senators on the Democrat side. And if voting reform they're trying to push through is blocked by one of the Democrats, it means they get 49 votes to the 51 on the Republican side. In that case, if a Democrat moves over on that vote, meaning they can't pass anything, regardless of the filibuster. And so they are in a tough place with that. And they do seem to be backing off even the idea of getting rid of the filibuster. So it doesn't seem right now that like they'd be able to pass this, although it is going to be an ongoing narrative they push, I believe, going well into 2022, because this is where it's at. Republicans want to bring back a lot of the election laws that were there prior to 2022, and maybe even put new ones in like voter ID. Democrats typically want to get rid of a lot of the election security protocols and even federalize the issues we saw happen in 2020. A lot of the changes that were made back in 2020, like universal mail-in ballots, no signature verification, bundling, these types of things. All right, folks, let's jump into some more stories for the night. Let's see here. I want to go over real brief what's happening in China. Now, I don't know how many of you were watching the show back maybe this time last year, but you might remember last year I was doing a lot of my shows in the office. It was a bit of a different setup at that time. They were more produced. Yeah, I had a few different stages of Crossroads, you might remember. Of course, we've always had interviews, but for a brief time during the COVID lockdowns, I did COVID-19 updates every night, just about. And then after that, once things opened up again, I went and did a lot of shows in the office with a green screen, a little more produced shows. And then we decided to just do the Q&As. And so that's what we're doing now. But when I was doing the produced shows, you might remember we did a lot on China. And one of the big stories we were covering was these massive floods taking place across China. You might remember the Three Gorges Dam. We were talking about the integrity of it not looking so hot, and some of these other issues and disasters spreading across China. Well, folks, it seems those disasters are back again, and maybe even worse this year. There's some pretty terrifying stories happening. Basically, here's what happened in China recently. In one of the provinces, a huge gush of water came down one of the big tunnels they have. And people who are in their cars, it's about a 1.5-minute drive through this big tunnel, sometimes even longer. People who were in their cars, a lot of them died because they were trapped inside the tunnel, and it was pretty terrible. The CCP's officials, they sent the military there, it seems, to cover it up, and they were dragging out bodies, and you see cars just strewn around like twigs in the mud. It's really horrific imagery. But there's also beliefs among some of the Chinese there that there's no way water could have rushed in that quickly, and it happened during rush hour as well. Which is leading many people to speculate that maybe the Chinese Communist Party actually opened up one of the local dams and flooded the area in order to prevent the dam from bursting. Now, we'll see what we can find on this. We'll see what information we can get out on this, but let's give a few updates on what's happening with it. And yeah, someone's saying 6,500 bodies. The real death toll is still not really known because they're hiding it. I believe it could have been up to 10,000. But they're hiding it. And so we don't really have a way of knowing right now what the real death toll is. But Epoch Times, you actually got an interview with one of the mothers. It says, mother looks for missing daughter as death toll for China's flood in question. It said it's been 4 agonizing days for Lu's mother, whose 18-year-old daughter is now missing after devastating floods swept through central China's Henan province. Lu Yangshan, who is about 5 feet 4 inches, who 4 inches tall, had been sheltered in their second-floor home in Quimao town when she was when she was washed away by the floods. Whose mother's told Epoch Times in an interview. The town is about a 40-minute drive. So this is not the tunnel. This is one of the towns. It's about a 40-minute drive west of Henan's provincial capital, Zhengguo. They said on July 20th, there were heavy rains. And this is the mother speaking. She said the floods reached the 3rd floor of the building. Think about that, folks. 3 stories of water, 3rd floor of the building. That's how high the waters went. She said, my daughter was alone in our 2nd floor home before she was swept away. Now, the woman said her neighborhood was badly hit by floods and many houses had been damaged as streets turned into rivers. Zhengguo, with a population of 12 million people. 12 million people, folks, in 3 stories of water. 3-story high water levels. Incredible, right? Again, with a population of 12 million people, has been one of the worst hits since the heavy rains began to fall in the region on July 17th. So, folks, it began on July 17th. This was July 20th. These are still continuing. And if you remember, as we were discussing last year, this went on for a long time last year. And they weren't this bad immediately. They weren't this bad last year in China immediately, if I remember right. And so this may be a really serious telltale sign of what's coming to China right now. I mean, this is mainly limited to one province right now. This is very likely going to spread to other provinces as it did last year. And so very likely, if this is the beginning of it, and already you're having 3 floors high of water, right? Three stories of water, and you're having tunnels get flooded and at least thousands of people dying in them, and who knows what else. And you might have seen the videos of people trapped in the subway cars as the water was rising up to their necks. There's some scary stuff coming, folks, and this is just the beginning of it. This is just the beginning of what's coming for China right now. Now, over the next 4 days from July 17th, the city received 617.1 millimeters, that's 24.3 inches of rainfall, which is almost equivalent to the annual average of 640 millimeters, 25.2 inches. Again, there's speculation something else might have happened with the dam. Another story here that says death toll of China flood climbs as response sparks criticism. It says the death toll has climbed in the central China city of Zhengzhou, as it grapples with the aftermath of flooding, pumping water from tunnels, thick mud on roads, and cleaning up debris. More questions over the authorities' preparedness have been raised on China's social media. Because this happened last year. If it happened last year, then it was going to come again. Yeah, local officials probably should have been prepared for it. 12 million people in Zhengzhou City experienced severe rainfall since Saturday, and the city saw record-breaking downpour between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. local time on Tuesday, with more than 201 millimeters, 8 inches in 1 hour, according to the Meteorological Authority. Now, folks, again, we're already seeing record levels, and this is just a few days into these rains, into these floods. Last year, this went on for at least well over a month. And so get ready for it, folks. This is coming to China and very likely going to be spreading throughout China. And remember last year, too, you had heavy rains in the south of China, but you had dry spells in the north. And so the farming took a big hit on this as well. Not to mention damaged infrastructure, which very likely was not rebuilt in most of China. Right? Water damage to a lot of infrastructure, meaning that foundations could have been weakened by this point. I don't know if you folks, well, living in New York, maybe we experience this more often, but I've had it happen to me twice living in New York where, a neighbor above, for example, forgets to turn off their central heating thing and it leaks water and it gets into the floor and the ceiling just collapses one day. It's happened to me twice living in New York. And the reason for that is if you let water sit on an area, like if water gets into the foundation or water gets into the ceiling or something like that, it weakens it. And over time, it's going to collapse even naturally. Now, imagine where you had floods take place along these cities, all throughout a lot of central and southern China. And if that water was not dealt with, right, and a lot of these areas wouldn't have the means of dealing with it. If those buildings were not demolished or repurposed or whatever like that, people went in and fixed the water damage, you're going to have weakened infrastructure coming now for these floods. Anything that had water damage last year that was not fixed is going to be weakened now. And if the waters are even more terrible now than they were last year, and they already are, you're going to be watching something pretty terrible coming to China, folks. So I'll keep you updated on it as news comes out. Again, remember last year we had a lot of disaster coverage on China. I will be keeping you updated on this. Now, that said, there's some other issues happening in the world right now. And you might remember that during the lockdowns, all right, folks, remember, let's go back in time. Remember when the lockdowns were starting and local government officials in New York and California and other areas were saying, oh, the virus is a serious threat. And in order to make sure people are safe, we just need to release all of our prisoners from the prisons. Anyone remember that? We need to let the prisoners out. And then right after they let them out, suddenly there were all these massive riots across the United States with these BLM riots. Remember the riots started right after they did that? And then remember how they changed a lot of the law. Well, through the riots, pushed for defunding the police and got rid of a lot of the police forces. And then some of the states even decriminalized a lot of misdemeanor crimes and even some serious crimes like theft under $900. Well, folks, it seems now that there's crime waves across the United States. Who would have thought that releasing prisoners from prison and legalizing crime would start crime waves? But it's happening. In California right now, they're saying they're experiencing a crime tsunami, according to the district attorney in Sacramento. It says here, California is experiencing a wave of crime, even as Governor Gavin Newsom, and he's up for re-election soon, we'll have to see what happens, is claiming a decrease during the past 3 decades, officials say. And Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert is telling the Epoch Times, you've got violent crimes off the charts. Violent crimes, not just normal crimes, folks, violent crimes. You've got this tsunami of things that are happening. Violent crime, illegal guns, and rampant theft. And on July 21st in Los Angeles, when asked if state policies are making crime worse, policies are making crime worse, Governor Newsom denied the state is seeing a rise in crime. And Newsom said, the evidence doesn't back it up. Well, if you legalize crime, it's not always called crime. Let's put it that way. And if you don't prosecute crime, it's not really documented typically. But it says this. He says, last 3 decades, we've actually seen a significant decline in crime in the state. Now, again, New York, this is California, but New York in the 90s was not doing so hot. 3 decades is talking about pretty high crimes. And so they're saying this is the highest crime in 3 decades, going back to the 1990s. That's not a good sign, folks. But again, they've decriminalized a lot of theft. They decriminalized a lot of drugs. And so if they've decriminalized a lot of misdemeanor crime, what does that mean? It means that not only is crime as high as it was back in the 90s, but the type of crime, right, is much worse because that's what they're actually prosecuting. And the frequency of that more violent type of crime is on par with the entire picture of crime back in the 90s, basically. But it's not just California. We also see this in other areas. In Washington now, the Washington, D.C. police chief is saying the city is coddling criminals after the latest shooting. They're saying they're coddling criminals, suggesting, again, what we've been talking about on the actual cause of this crime wave that's happening. And it says here, Washington, D.C.'s chief of police said the city's criminal justice system is too lenient on criminals. And, maybe, decriminalizing misdemeanor crime would do that again. And that they say this is now contributing to a recent spike in crime that included a shooting near the popular Logan Circle this week. Metropolitan Police Department Chief Robert Conti told reporters that courts are barely open and cannot process violent crime offenders. And this is responding to the incident in Logan Circle. That, folks, the courts are barely open and the courts are not able to process violent offenders. Now, a popular restaurant, again, is where this happened, the shooting. And Conti is telling reporters the justice system that we have right now is not functioning the way it should. He said the courts are not open. This is a fact. Throughout 2020, he said, violent criminals have not been disposed of. In other words, they're not being put behind bars or, who knows what else, and are now in the community rather than in jail or prison, maybe because they let them out of prison. And he said, and they're not prosecuting them. He said, the real issue is we have a vicious cycle of bad actors who do things, no accountability, and they end up back in the community. And he said, I guarantee you, when we lock up whoever did this, they will be no stranger to us. In other words, if people, he's suggesting with this shooting, he's suggesting when they finally find the person who carried out the shooting, it's probably going to be someone they've arrested before. Because what's happening is they keep arresting people, and because you have a kangaroo court system, basically, people come in and they're let out. The same people who commit these low-level crimes start committing bigger crimes and bigger crimes because they know they can get off the hook with it until someone gets shot or someone gets killed, as you're seeing here. And the local police chief there is saying that when they do find this person, probably it's going to be someone they've arrested before. This is one of the big issues you have across the country right now, folks, with this crime wave, again, really fueled by government policy. All right, folks, that said, it's getting a bit late, so I'm going to call it a night. Again, I do these live Q&As every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. A lot of, the one thing 2020 and 2021 have brought us is no shortage of big news stories. There's a lot of news on an ongoing basis, and doing our best to sift through it all and get you the biggest stories of each, few days, and also give you some deeper insights into the big picture of them. Folks, if you do want to support Crossroads, still, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help this channel. If you want to go the extra mile, please do tell a friend or family member about it. It helps us grow, and we would appreciate it. Also, if you really want to support us, please support us on either, we do have Donor Box if you want to donate. And thanks again to our Donor Box supporters. We also have epochtv.com/crossroads. That's epochtv.com/crossroads. That's our own uncensored video platform. All the Crossroads interviews are there, and our special features are there as well, including the last documentary I did, which was America Rewritten. You can get a free trial on there as well, so please check it out, folks. All right, that said, appreciate all of you. Always enjoy doing these. And as always, folks, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.
The American story was once seen as a light of strength and freedom for the world. It created a government by the people and for the people, where rights were given not by leaders, but by God. Yet now the very fabric of the nation is under assault.
Without us, I don't think you'd have free market capitalism. I can't think where it exists in its essence anywhere else.
I think the American idea is forward-looking, it's optimistic, It's the idea that children will live better than their parents.
The Constitution mostly is a guarantee of what government cannot do.
If we lose the Constitution, we lose our liberty, we lose our prosperity, we lose our way of life, and the world loses because the world has been depending on us for a half century.
So every tyrant in America right now, from the radical left to the globalists to big tech to the Communist Party of China, are all trying to destroy the US Constitution. Because if they can do that, they have complete power over every aspect of our lives. That's their dream, and that's our nightmare.
What is the real story of America? Why did the Founding Fathers choose a republic over a democracy? And what would the world be if the bedrock of the American Constitution was lost?